Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tracking a ghost. We are diving into one of the most wildly captivating historical mysteries of the 20th century. Did Adolf Hitler's right-hand man actually escape the fall of Berlin? For decades, the disappearance of Martin Bormann just fueled endless speculation, these massive international manhunts, and some seriously intricate conspiracy theories. So we're going to break down the hunt for this super elusive figure. We'll specifically look at this incredibly elaborate South American survival narrative that took root in Chile, and then we're going to contrast all of that with the cold, hard forensic evidence that finally laid the ghost to rest. All right, let's just dive right in. Okay, so to really understand why the whole world fully believed Martin Bormann could have escaped, we have to look at a verified precedent. I mean, look at this. This is the actual Red Cross identity document issued in 1948 to Adolf Eichmann, one of the key architects of the Holocaust. He used the alias Ricardo Clement to successfully flee Italy and sail straight to Argentina. Now, what's really crucial about this is that it proved escape was absolutely entirely plausible. The route lines were real. If a top Nazi like Eichmann could get fake paperwork, build a totally new life in South America, and slip right through the fingers of Allied intelligence, well, why couldn't Bormann do the exact same thing? And make no mistake, Bormann was the absolute ultimate prize for Nazi hunters. As Hitler's private secretary and the head of the party chancellery, the guy wielded immense power and was deeply, directly complicit in the regime's darkest atrocities. When the post-war Nuremberg trials wrapped up, Bormann was sentenced to the maximum penalty, death. But he was sentenced in absentia. Why? Because he had basically vanished into thin air after fleeing the Berlin bunker in May 1945. And that disappearance? It spawned decades of intense global paranoia. Because they couldn't produce a body, the world was just constantly looking over its shoulder, waiting for him to finally surface. Which brings us to the Juan Keller enigma, a phantom life in Chile. Now, this became arguably the single most compelling, detailed rumor of Bormann's survival. The idea was that he built this elaborate new life in the quiet, remote regions of Chile under a totally new identity. According to deep investigative reports, including this fascinating 1971 deep dive by the Chilean magazine Siete Días, this guy named Juan Keller materialized in the country right after the war, and the details around his alias are just bizarre. In April 1946, he's granted Chilean citizenship by a judge in Rio Negro. He claims he's a farmer born in Riachuelo in 1904, but here is the massive red flag. He had absolutely zero legal documents to back any of this up. Instead, he used two illiterate farmhands who worked for him as his sole legal witnesses to establish who he was. He lives this quiet life at the Las Trancas hacienda, apparently getting frequent visits from other Germans, and then, bam! He vanishes without a trace in 1952. I mean, the sheer audacity of using illiterate witnesses to forge a legal identity. It perfectly mirrors the desperate, calculated tactics of a guy on the run. And then, decades later, the mystery gets even deeper. Reports start surfacing about a 49-year-old Chilean woman named Maria Elena Keller-Keller. She actually steps forward claiming to be the adopted daughter of this mysterious Juan Keller. She said the man who adopted her had vanished around 1960. And because researchers had already flagged Juan Keller as a highly suspected alias for Bormann, her claims were like a lightning rod. It sparked this massive, renewed modern hunt to track her down and finally verify her father's true identity. So this wasn't just some old, dusty historical footnote anymore. It triggered an actual modern true crime investigation. Teams of researchers hit the ground in Osorno, Chile, just desperately searching for Maria Elena, who was known locally as Eliana. They figured actually, if we can just speak to her, we might finally crack this whole case wide open. They were literally knocking on doors, asking locals, "We're looking for a lady called Eliana Keller. Can you help us? Do you know where she is?" It was this incredible race to see if a trail from 1946 could somehow still be warm. And as they probed the local community, these investigators started directly confronting residents about Keller. They'd ask, was he a good guy? Did people actually like him? And what they uncovered was wild. There were these explosive local rumors that had just been simmering under the surface for decades. Right there in the community, it was an open secret. People were literally whispering that Juan Keller was Martin Bormann. Just imagine the tension there, right? An international war criminal potentially living out his days as an ordinary farmer right in their backyard. Because you have to remember the incredibly high stakes of this South American chase. As the investigators themselves pointed out, if you have Martin Bormann, you have Adolf Hitler. Finding Bormann's adopted daughter wasn't just about catching one old man. Bormann was the keeper of the right secrets. If you could connect the dots on his escape route, you could theoretically unravel the ultimate secrets of the escaping Nazi elite. You'd expose exactly who facilitated their travel, where all the money went, and exactly how they integrated themselves into South American society. So, we have this incredibly compelling story, right? An alias, a remote farm, illiterate witnesses, an adopted daughter, the local rumors. It all fits perfectly into this grand narrative of a master escape. But what if the ghost never actually left Berlin? What if the entire world was on a wild goose chase, hunting shadows in the Chilean countryside, while the truth was just buried under the rubble of Germany all along? Well, let's track the cold, hard forensic timeline to see how a completely different reality takes shape. On May 2nd, 1945, Bormann definitely attempted to escape the bunker. Some witnesses even claimed he was killed shortly after, but no one knew for sure. Fast forward to December 1972. Construction workers are digging near the Lehrter station in West Berlin, and they unearth 2 skeletons. Now, for decades, it was heavily suspected that these were Bormann and another Nazi official. But it wasn't until 1998 that the definitive, undeniable proof finally arrived. In 1998, German authorities ordered genetic testing on the remains. Directed by Professor Wolfgang Eisenmenger of the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, they ran tests using DNA from a living relative of Bormann, and the results? An absolute 100% match. Furthermore, the autopsy found glass fragments right there in the skeleton's jaw, which proved conclusively that Bormann died by biting down on a cyanide capsule to avoid capture back in 1945. This indisputable science basically shut down the South American rumors forever. Juan Keller, whoever he really was definitely not Martin Bormann. And just to ensure this dark chapter was permanently, irrevocably closed, Bormann's remains were incinerated. On August 16, 1999, his ashes were scattered over the Baltic Sea. They kept the exact location a total secret, guaranteeing that no grave could ever become some sort of twisted shrine for neo-Nazis. The ghost that had haunted international intelligence for over half a century was finally, unequivocally laid to rest. And I think this just brilliantly illustrates the crazy clash between myth and reality. On one hand, you have the South American myth, this massive web of sightings, the intricate Juan Keller alias, the Las Trancas hacienda, the adopted daughter. It felt so incredibly tangible, largely because men like Eichmann had actually done exactly this. But on the other hand, we have the Berlin reality, a desperate flight from a bunker, a quick death by a cyanide capsule in 1945, an unmarked grave near a train station, and the brutal finality of 1998 DNA testing. Which leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. The rumors of Bormann in South America were so believable precisely because the world knew for a fact that the rat lines existed. Real historical traumas, like the actual successful escapes of heinous figures such as Adolf Eichmann or Josef Mengele, spawned decades of false hope and misdirection when it came to Martin Bormann. We literally projected our fears onto the map of the world. So if verified history created such a plausible, detailed myth for over 50 years, how many other historical truths that we accept today are just shadows born of our deepest fears? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and always keep questioning the history in front of you.